Valve is not the only company that is looking at Linux and saying, you know what? I think that we can do better than what we're doing right now with Windows. It feels like it could be the year of Linux. And trust me, I understand your skepticism. Every single time that I see a headline, a thumbnail, a video title, an article that says something along the lines of the year of Linux is finally here, every single time I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. But it feels like it might actually be real this time. And it's not just one piece of information. It's many pieces of information that have been coming out for the past few months that have led me to think that maybe we're finally at that point where Windows is no longer going to be that shackle around the ankle of most gamers. And I understand that there's a ton of you that probably have ditched Windows years and years and years ago. And trust me, I understand that it's been possible, but it hasn't always been something that everybody would really consider doing. So let's talk about why people would be interested in getting away from Windows. Well, number one, spyware. Windows essentially Copilot is, and I can't say that it is spyware, but I would say that to me, it feels like spyware. They introduced this feature where they would screenshot your desktop at random points throughout the day. And they did it in order to, better, make your experience better. But where does that information go? I don't trust the engineers at Windows to not make a mistake and have the data that they are collecting on me leaked. I don't like the idea that they're constantly collecting telemetry on how I'm using my machine, a machine that I paid for. So things like that are just one of the many reasons why people are getting sick of Windows. Another reason people are getting sick of Windows is the nonstop advertisements. And when you click the start button, you constantly see ads. When you first open a fresh install of Windows, it installs a bunch of shit that nobody asked for. McAfee installed every single Windows installation that I have has had McAfee pre-installed, and then I have to go through the bullshit of having to uninstall it. That's not something that I'm interested in having to deal with. I just want the software that I want, and I don't want anything else. And I shouldn't have to jump through hoops to get rid of stuff that paid Microsoft to get put in front of my eyeballs all of the time. Then there's the nonstop update nonsense. I cannot tell you the number of times where I've sat down to use a Windows computer only to realize that the Windows update had happened overnight or something, and suddenly all of my sound drivers are not set up the way that I wanted them to. And that means that I sit down to record a video and it doesn't actually record any sound or something like that. These kind of things constantly happen, and it's one of the reasons that I don't like using Windows. In fact, if you guys want to participate in this, leave a comment down below that like button. What are the reasons that you want to ditch Windows that I haven't already listed? Let me know what you guys think. All right. I have to be fair though. Not everybody is fed up with Windows. There's plenty of people out there that are perfectly happy using Windows, and there's a lot of really good reasons why. I'm going to stick to the gamers. Let's think about anti-cheat. There's a lot of games that won't run on Linux because anti-cheat doesn't work on Linux the way, well, the companies that make the anti-cheat and the companies that make the games don't want to support Linux because it's too expensive for the limited number of customers that it would actually help. So instead of spending that money, they just say, well, you can't play the game on Linux because of anti-cheat, and then they wash their hands of it and walk away. Another reason is legacy applications. There's applications that really will only run on Windows. And because of that, people feel like they don't have a choice. They have to stick with Windows no matter what. And then the third reason is that feeling, this is probably the reason I used it for so long, but that feeling of familiarity. When you sit down at a Windows machine, you basically know how it's going to operate. You know what to expect. If you run into a problem, you generally know how to fix it. Why? Because you've been using it for 20 plus years. When you switch over to Linux, whatever distro it might be, you have to learn new ways of doing things. And those new ways of doing things are like speed bumps. And anytime there's any kind of speed bumps or friction, it slows down the adoption of new software. And then the third reason that a lot of people stay with, or the third, fourth, it doesn't matter. And then the next reason that a lot of people stay with Windows is because they have analysis paralysis. There's so many different distros of Linux out there, and there's so many different ways of doing things, just desktop environments, different distros, that people feel like, I don't know which one to pick. And so they don't want to make a choice. They just stick with Windows because it's what they're used to. So all of those things are reasons why people might want to stick with Windows. And you know what? Even just because I'm looking to ditch Windows completely, and I have pretty much for the most part at this point, but just because I'm looking to ditch Windows doesn't mean everybody has to, and that's okay. But what I'm really looking for is more choice. I'm looking for less reasons to force people to stay on Windows when they actually don't want to use Windows anymore. And that's a really big deal. Having more choice is always a good thing for you and me, the end user. But now that I've set up some context, let's talk about the actual news. Back when Valve unleashed the Steam Deck, alongside it came SteamOS 3.0. And part of SteamOS 3.0 was the inclusion of Proton. Proton is a compatibility layer that allows games that are made specifically for Windows to run on other operating systems, specifically Linux. And it works exceptionally well. But if you are somebody who likes to own your games, that hasn't always been a really great solution. And let me explain why. If you play games on PlayStation, you don't own your games. If you play games on Xbox, you don't own your games. If you play games on Nintendo, you don't own your games unless you have physical media. And even then, in some cases, you still don't own your games. If you play games on Steam, you don't own your games. I mean, there was a lawsuit in California that forced Valve to change the wording. When you go to buy a game from them, you are not purchasing a game, you are purchasing a license to play that game. A license which can be revoked at any time. I'm not going to say the only place where this is not true, but the one place that I'm familiar with where that is not true is Good Old Games, also known as GOG, which used to be owned by CD Projekt Red, but then got sold to the original owners of GOG. It doesn't matter who owns it at this point, but GOG is DRM-free, meaning if you buy a game on GOG and then you back up that game on a hard drive somewhere, in 30 years, as long as you have the hardware in order to play this game on, you can still play that game. It doesn't matter. Nobody can turn the servers off. Nobody can take that game away. When you buy a game on GOG, you own it. You actually own it. It is one of the very few examples of when you can actually own digital goods, if that makes sense. But up until now, if you were using Linux and you wanted to buy a game through GOG, you did have to jump through a few hoops in order to get your game to run on Linux. The hoops weren't that big. They weren't hard to jump through. It was definitely something that even a novice user like me could easily accomplish. That said, it was hoops to jump through. And like I said earlier, anytime you add speed bumps or hoops or any kind of friction, you lose some people. Well, GOG just made a huge announcement that they are working on getting a Linux native version of GOG Galaxy. I found this over at Gaming on Linux, and here's exactly what they had to say. Linux continues to be one of the topics we hear most about from our community, and we really appreciate the passion and patience of everyone who has been asking about it. Following the rule that we announced earlier this year, we now have a specialist on board that are actively exploring the best way to approach Linux to support for GOG Galaxy. This is a significant undertaking, so while we're not ready to share any specific plans, timelines, or results just yet, it is very much an area we're investing time and effort into. While this news is awesome, it still sounds like it's definitely a long way off. But each time that we see a story like this, where a company is taking steps to make sure that their stuff works on Linux, that's one less speed bump, hoop, friction that people will run into, one less option that will make them say, you know what, it's just easier on Windows. I'm going to go back to Windows. And every time that we get an announcement that says, guess what, we're working to make things easier for people who want to use Linux, that means that the Linux community is going to grow. And as the Linux community, especially the people who are gaming on Linux, as that community continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, it makes it harder and harder for other companies to ignore. That's earlier I said quite often that companies don't want to support Linux specifically because the number of people who they would actually be benefiting by supporting Linux is so small that it's not worth the financial resources that they have to put towards it. Well, that's an argument against it. But if the people who are using Linux continues to get bigger and bigger, well, that means that more people are going to be using it. And if there's more people using it, then it makes it harder for these companies to ignore. I think I just kind of talked in circles for a bit, so I might edit that part out if it's easy enough for me to do. But it isn't just Valve and it isn't just GOG that are working towards making sure that the people who are using Linux are able to play their games. It's also companies like EA. A few months ago, I saw this. Well, actually, it looks like 5 months ago. It says this is EA is hiring a senior anti-cheat engineer to lead development of a native ARM64 driver for their Javelin kernel anti-cheat system and start laying the groundwork for Linux and Proton support. Specifically, it says chart a path for EA Javelin anti-cheat to support additional operating systems and hardware in the future, such as Linux and Proton. So even giant companies like EA are starting to pay attention. So when you've got Valve making Proton and taking all of the steps in order to make it possible to play games on Linux, and then you also have companies like GOG stepping into the fray to make their storefront natively run on Linux so that we can buy games from them. And, you know, hopefully, I don't know if they're allowed to do this, but maybe they can integrate Proton directly into that store. I mean, Proton, I believe, is open source because it was between Code Weavers and Valve. I think it's open source, so I don't see why they wouldn't be able to do that, especially because we've seen GE Proton, which, you know, Glorious Eggroll makes Proton versions that are a little bit more advanced, or they have features that Valve doesn't quite have yet. If he can do that, then I don't see why GOG wouldn't be able to have Proton just natively included in their store so it runs the same way that Steam games do. And then you have companies like EA, which are like some of the biggest companies in the world when it comes to games, able to do this as well, or taking steps to do this as well. I think that spells really good news for people like me who are absolutely sick and tired of all of the things that Windows is doing wrong. But what do you guys think about this news? Is this something you're interested? Are you already on Linux full-time, or are you still using Windows for most of your gaming? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Stay rad, everybody.